So as I've already been introduced, I'll just kind of jump right into it and just basically say that, it's really good to be down here. I haven't been to Zagreb in almost, I think it's been about 2 years, maybe. It's been quite some time, late 2019. And now that things are finally starting to open back up, it's kind of nice to get down here and see everybody and to see the people at Bird. So thanks for allowing us to crash the party here this evening, and looking forward to seeing what else happens here. So what I'm going to basically talk about is a lot of the work that we've been doing, and how we're trying to funnel in what has been years of research into AI and social systems, and create viable product out of this. And it's a bit tricky, but I think that, the way that we're approaching this is a way that's going to ultimately work and allow for some really interesting innovations to kind of come from the university sphere in this academic world that does all sorts of interesting things to try and help save the world, into a much more scalable software as a service approach that can still help do interesting things and save the world, but also have a lot of value that goes far beyond just like one or two users at a university or in some sort of a think tank for a government. There we go. So the most common way that AI appears to be used by most people in the industry now really falls under the category of sentiment analysis. As Surgeon said earlier in the introduction, we focus a lot at Allen specifically on language analysis and natural language processing. Allen itself is really an acronym that stands for Advanced Language and Network Analytics, but it's also a play and an ode to Alan Turing at the same time, who's a personal hero of mine. And I've been perpetually frustrated by sentiment analysis because it doesn't give people what they actually need, and it doesn't really give them what they think they're getting most of the time anyway. Effectively, sentiment analysis allows you to input some sort of data, typically language, like a post on social media, and you get a probability that it is positive or negative that pops out at the end. A lot of the models aren't even that accurate. You'll see things at like 60% accuracy that will actually be put forward on the market by different companies. And I think that that's a little low. If you were told, would you give me $1 million and I can give you 60% assurance that I'm going to do what I tell you I'm doing, most people would say no, but that's effectively what a lot of people are paying for right now. And they're using sentiment analysis to try and really answer a lot of questions that don't have to do with whether or not a client is happy or sad, but they're trying to understand all of these other advanced issues with their company or their business model. So what we're trying to do is move this from sentiment analysis and really blow it up well beyond sentiment. So CulturePulse is the platform that we're doing this on, and it's a software as a service product that really wants to allow people to predict human behavior by predicting human emotions and psychological states using publicly available data that the market has through Reddit, through Twitter, through emails, through chatbots. Basically any store of natural language data, we will use natural language processing to pull value out of that data. The ontology that we use to do that is called Pythia. And the idea isn't that we're going to automate everything with our artificial intelligence. The idea is that we're going to provide a very useful tool that works in many different languages, does not need historical data, and also gives a lot of information from many different dimensions to augment the work that actual qualitative marketing teams or data science teams, people in PR, people in politics are already doing. So the idea isn't to necessarily replace people, it's to give them the quantitative edge on their qualitative data that they need to make intelligent and informed decisions. One of the things that we kind of strive for out of maybe either a habit or an obsession with perfection is myself and my co-founder, Laurent. We both come out of the university level, and in university level psychology, if you're an academic studying psychology, if you don't have certain thresholds of accuracy and certain thresholds of confidence that your system works, you're never going to be able to publish these results. So 60% is way too low. No one's really interested in 60%. So we really try and go with 95%. We've recently done cross-testing and case studies with people taking social media data from social media networks we've never used, and then comparing that with lab data from those exact same participants on their personality, and shown that we are able to get the 95% accuracy that we're aiming for in like the big five, which is kind of the key for personality prediction in AI right now. So getting that to another level of accuracy is something that we really want to look for. Personality, of course, is a big thing, but we work with a lot of different things. So you'll see here that, under psychological, we do have positive and negative emotion, and that's your standard typical sentiment analysis. All of the other things that are on this list here are going beyond sentiment analysis, and they're things that we currently have deployed and tested in our system now, and are being used by people from Reddit marketers all the way to the Norwegian government in their COVID response to try and better understand the spread of misinformation and what are the kinds of linguistic tags that come along with misinformation that make it spread so far and make it so catchy. So you see we have things like personal interests, so trying to understand what people's motivations are, whether or not they're concerned about family, whether or not they're concerned with financial issues. We're also doing things profiling hate speech and separating things like hate speech from offensive speech, so that people who are just being offensive, possibly for humor, aren't being kicked off of platforms. And so building these sorts of systems that understand people in the culture and social groups that they come from is really kind of the key to moving this beyond sentiment and into something that's extracting real value. So a couple of the sort of functions of what we're doing that I'll showcase come from active use case studies. One of the things that we're working very diligently on with a number of our partners in Los Angeles is the use of our system to predict the success and potential sort of market segmentation of scripts that are coming through different production houses. We're also interested in seeing, can we go as far as to predict whether or not you should go with one actor or another actor in the leading role of that production. And so I'll give a little bit of information on how we're doing that now. So this is sort of the open question, right? Can we predict the next American Sniper, which is a very popular movie, but it was a popular movie because it appealed to a lot of different people and showed something new that they hadn't seen before. So it wasn't the same movie made again. One of the ways that we go about doing this is after we're collecting all of the data, which we use a number of different data pipelines to do, we have an advanced form of what many people consider topic modeling, where we're able to extract all of the different topics that are embedded inside of all of the texts, but then analyze those topics further across different dimensions to say what it is that people like or don't like about those topics. So when someone is talking about something like the pandemic, for example, we can not only tell them whether it's positive or negative, which some of the people who do AI in the room know as aspect-based sentiment analysis. We go a lot further and can say that what they are worried about in the pandemic is that they're interested in, or they have a concern with contagion threats related to their family. So getting much, much further than just positive and negative, and getting it to a level of being able to say what it is that's motivating their behavior psychologically, takes that to that next step. And that's what we think is really useful here. So that's one example of it. The other, of course, is trying to figure out what texts resonate with a certain community. So if you have a Reddit community, you take one of the subreddits like Wall Street Bets, for example. If you post something into that community, some things are going to go over really well, some things are just going to totally flop. And a lot of what it is that people will post into a community information that the rest of the community doesn't find relevant. If they find it relevant, they engage with it. They'll upvote it, they'll comment on it. Its score will ultimately increase inside of the community. So being able to take the psychological profile of that community that we can generate using the AI, you can manipulate texts that go into that system so that you can sort of pre-test a post that would go onto a subreddit community before it comes out, right? So it's similar to testing sort of the A/B testing that you see in marketing. It's just that you don't need to pay for or risk your image through that A/B testing because you do it in an entirely simulated environment where no one actually sees the text that you're putting out. You can do the same thing, not just with short form data, but with long form data as well. So we can take the entirety of a script and put that into HBO, or put that into the Netflix subreddit, or put that into Fox subreddits, and allow that to position and understand from a production angle who could be the most likely audience that's going to resonate with this script a little bit more than the others. So some of the examples that we have here, for example, comes from a script that we have that we've had to anonymize for a number of reasons. But it's a script that we've been working with a team in LA to try and better understand. And they put the task to us as, can you help us to profile who could be the good leading man on this script? And so what we had done is scraped down a lot of posts from social media outlets that particularly related to Alexander Skarsgård and Chris Pratt, because just in casual conversation with the production company, they had mentioned that it would be someone like one of these 2 or 3 people. And so we chose 2 to just kind of show how this technology would demonstrate this. And when we looked at the general psychological profile of how those conversations are versus what you see in the script, we're able to basically match all of them together so that you can understand what that would look like and who might resonate best with that script. And effectively what we found is that for this particular script, Chris Pratt had 8% more resonance with the overall community, and this community was made up of about 5 million different members and different profiles online, than Alexander Skarsgård. So, when using this, you could expand this to, an arbitrarily large number of people. It's just a matter of time and resources to analyze it. But we can take this data and kind of distill it into these sorts of simple, tangible decisions of people saying, do I make decision A or do I make decision B? And we say, well, if you give us the data that's here, we'll run it in the simulated system, and we can help give you the quantitative edge that you need to make that decision. So this is one example of just such a decision. As I mentioned, the background of what we're doing in the back, sort of the back end, if you will, here, is social simulation with different communities. Now, Reddit is particularly interesting in this regard because the very structure of their social network is based around the community level. It's not like Twitter where it's about either the hashtag or the user. In Reddit, it's less about the user and more about the community that user is engaging with. And so taking this sort of cultural approach that I'm generally prone to take as someone who comes out of a field of anthropology, understanding it as a culture, as a community, actually is leveraged quite well. And it's one of this new approach is one of the reasons why a lot of companies have not been able to engage on Reddit with a lot of accuracy, with a lot of power, with a lot of success. They'll go to Twitter, they'll go to Facebook, where they can effectively just pay their way to the top. But with Reddit, you need to engage your way to the top, and that becomes very difficult. So having the ability to actually simulate the community and engage with the community on their level, using sort of their language, right? Throwing in words like diamond hands and YOLO and stonks and things that other people might not know in the community, but that community knows quite fluently. Those can be very, very powerful different signals within a community that can help predict the success, for example. So having these community insights can allow you to really just kind of to attenuate your own message so that you are producing what other people want to consume. A lot of people are doing this through focus group testing. They're doing this through large market survey testing. They're taking a lot of very expensive and very inefficient ways to try and understand small groups of people and then say, okay, now I'm going to try and create a campaign for millions of people based on a couple of people that have happened in the survey. The community insights approach that we're taking, because it goes so far beyond the sentiment detection, is really doing larger profiling of different topics and psychological properties. It allows you to actually just go to those 3 million people that you want to address and address them. So it doesn't have to rely so much on the guess and check approach. This sort of simulated network approach it's very different in its core tenet from what Luke had just spoken about at Oracle. Their network approach is a little bit different, right? What we're really doing is trying to understand not necessarily what people are going to do based on what they think other people are going to do, but just trying to look at the aggregate whole in the network and then work off of that. So we don't need to survey them directly, although we can use surveys in interesting ways. But this is something that's just like a data scraping operation. So when we're predicting stock markets, we're doing it with live Twitter feeds. And we're doing it with Reddit scraping. We're not going to be doing surveys. So we don't do anything in that area, for example, that's 3 or 4 days out, like Luke and Oracle are doing. We're looking at 5 minutes out. So for example, currently we are following Tesla, and we have a new sort of showcase that we hope to be releasing soon called Tesla in the Future, which is able to predict Tesla with very good accuracy. We've seen in certain testing up to 90% and over 90% accuracy at predicting whether or not Tesla is going to go up or down in the next 5 minutes. And we're doing that by creating these sorts of feed, using this AI deployed on the Twitter feed for Tesla and tracking all of the Tesla hashtags. So this becomes a way of doing this that's a new and interesting way of approaching it. This is the profile for Wall Street Bets, just to kind of circle back to that area. Outside of the marketing area, of course, if you can predict a stock market, you can make money. And so one of the things that we wanted to know during the first time that Wall Street Bets kind of struck with the GameStop rebellion was, what is it that's motivating them? Is it just like this is fun, that it's a game? A lot of people in the news were saying that these are just uneducated, retail investors. They're just throwing their money away. They don't understand. They're just doing it for the fun, or they're doing it out of hatred or spite. And when we ran our analysis, a lot of people, really what we found is that people are doing this sort of to try and facilitate a better life and their free time. They're doing this because they want a vacation. And they're doing this because they view it as an achievement internally for themselves. So that was one of the things that kind of broke that narrative. In the telecom space, we also think that there's a lot of possibilities for the CulturePulse approach to it. The way that you act or react in let's say a customer service interaction situation, whether it's with a chatbot or whether it's with an actual on the phone person that you're working with, or live chat, which is increasingly common. The personality that you have brings a flavor to that interaction that can be leveraged to make your experience better. Currently, most people using chatbots or using these sorts of online communication and self-help customer service systems, they are using sentiment analysis, is one of the things that we found in our discussions with them. But it raises a very interesting question, which is how many of us here have ever contacted customer service because we had something positive to say? No one does this, right? This is something that only crazy people will do, is they're going to call to talk about how great it is because they're going to wait on the line for 10 to 20 minutes on hold listening to horrible music just so that you can tell you how good your job is. Typically, it's the opposite. They're going to be there for 10 to 20 minutes on hold to tell you how horrible you are at your job because your phone doesn't work. So paying for sentiment analysis is wasted money. We know the pipeline of the individual necessitates that it is negative. So whatever you're doing with that sentiment analysis is likely not helping. But if you can understand the personality and the interests and the trouble of that individual, you can help better route who it is that they need to talk to, what desk it needs to go to, what department it needs to go to, or what you need to change about your product in order to make a better customer service experience, or just get ahead of the problems that already exist in the product that you've already put on the market. And so taking this from sentiment analysis to this more psychographic mapping that includes personality, you can say, okay, look, this person who's calling right now has high levels of narcissism. So they have a general emotional instability. So you want to combat that with someone who is extremely emotionally stable so that they don't start going back and forth and you end up fighting with someone on customer service. You want them to have someone who has very high openness, lots of empathy, someone who can resonate with them, and someone who can help calm them down before they hang up and just go to another company. And so that's one of the things that our system is trying to look to profile. The last thing that we're doing is taking all of this data, right? Because when we analyze a text, we can get all of these data dimensions out of it. Sometimes it's zero, right? If there's nothing about family, there's nothing about family. This is one of the things that's interesting about taking our approach, which is not based entirely in machine learning and not entirely based on probability. With other approaches is that even if it's not about family, it might have certain words in a word embedding system that's going to flag a little bit of family. We're not using a system like that. If there's nothing about family in that post, we're usually pretty good about not actually saying that there's anything about family in that post. And the same goes for personality, the same goes for other things. So it's a very conservative system when we do our psychographic mapping. When you take that and you match that with locational data, longitude, latitude, city mapping, et cetera, it allows you to not just say what's happening or when it's happening, but also where it's happening. So for airlines, for example, negative sentiment could be going wild on Twitter, but it's because of a backup at Heathrow. Heathrow being a major hub means that that backup at Heathrow is likely to become a backup in Atlanta. It's going to become a backup in Vienna. It's going to become a backup in Frankfurt and a lot of other hubs throughout the world. So understanding that your real issue isn't Frankfurt, Vienna, or Atlanta, your real issue is in London, can help you to deploy resources more effectively. One of the other things that we do, though, naturally has to do with conflict prediction. And one of the things that this really came out of was a question about social stability and social instability. And so we are still engaging with different people who have interests in security and stability throughout the world, and trying to understand how you can help use AI to get in front of the next crisis. One of the biggest crises that we've had so far really was the Syrian refugee crisis, right? The conflict that was fairly localized ended up spreading to being a refugee crisis in Lesbos that our team has now been working on for 4 years. Where we've been going down to Lesbos and working with the local communities and the refugee centers to try and create AI systems that policymakers can use to better the lives of the people in those refugee centers, but also to help, relocate them into places where they can be integrated and help find a home. Because the conflict was such that a lot of them cannot go home to Syria, so they have to find new homes here in Europe. And using AI to help do that is something that we think was very powerful, and we've had a lot of success with that so far. We've worked with the immigration centers in the Netherlands, for example, to try and understand how you can use morality to profile individuals and compare the morality of the immigrants to the morality of the people who are in the system already, the people who are the heads of the system in the Netherlands. The other thing, though, that we want to try and do is predict the conflict itself so that we can prepare for the conflict before we even need to create the AI systems to mitigate the issue. Let's predict the issue so that we know what it is that we're going to do so that we can get ahead of it. And this comes from one of the data news feeds that we've been analyzing, where we've geolocated data on Syria. And you'll see there that there's, it starts fairly small and then it pops up. And what we're able to do here is within an hour or at hourly intervals, we can really do this at sub-hourly intervals, but I'm not sure that it makes much sense to do so. We can predict what the social conflict levels are in any particular region. So this allows you not only to predict where, or rather when, and what, but also where you need resources deployed. And this is something that's really informed what it is we do. Daniel Kahneman is another one of the personal heroes that I have. He is a psychologist who works in behavioral economics and is one of the people who discovered a number of very key psychological sort of tricks that our brains use that make it so that we're not rational, but we are still predictable. And one of the backbones of what we do with our AI is create systems that are predictably irrational, right? You don't want to make the perfect answer. Too much of computer science and data science is trying to find the right answer. And what we think is that it's not important that you find the right answer. It's important that you find the human answer, right? That human answer is what's going to be the answer that you most likely need. And so this again kind of comes full circle to where we started, right? This background difference between the qualitative and the quantitative approaches to what's going on. A lot of people have a lot of experience in qualitative data and reading different news reports and creating PR and marketing, but they don't have the data to back up what they need. And so what we're trying to do is not just provide them and overwhelm them with data, which we can easily do. I mean, that's been the perpetual problem of creating CulturePulse as a product, right? Is that we have so much data that we can give someone that a lot of times they don't know what to do with it. So what we're trying to do is help them to use this data to craft their own story. And by moving from just a lot of data that can create interesting papers to a platform that can allow them to craft their own story, that's something that can help them to make their own decision. Because otherwise, it's like when you go to the grocery store and you need to make a decision on what kind of cereal you want, and you have an entire aisle of cereal, it's just overwhelming. You have too much that you need to do. You have all of the data you need, every price, you can see the color of every box. It's all right there at your fingertips, but you still can't make a viable or useful or valuable decision with it. So moving to what we're really aiming to now is really getting right at Kahneman's quote. No one ever made a decision because of a number. They need a story. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. The team of who we are includes myself and Laurent, who is one of my co-founders. We've been working together for a number of years, and Brian and Maya. Brian, who's done all sorts of work. He's one of the world's top Reddit marketing experts. And then Maya, who's world-class product manager and really, did a lot to put this on today as well, and to keep everything going and to keep Laurent and I in line most of the time. I think it's probably what she does most of the day. Then we also have a number of associates that we work with, Surgeon, who you've spoken with earlier. We also have Armin, who makes everything very beautiful. And then we have Igor, who was here earlier. His background in psychology has been very useful for us to create a number of the parameters that we work with. His work in personality has been used, for example, in our system for personality tracking. And then Pablo Koznach. He is a researcher in Central and Eastern Europe that specializes in social stability and trying to bridge that qualitative and quantitative gap. And so we do a lot of work with conflict there. We do a lot of work with politics as well. And so he's been a big help as one of our associates in that area. The partnerships of the people that we're currently working with and talking to, Norse and CMAC are great think tanks. We do work with a number of different universities, the Research Council of Norway. We're going to be doing the analytics for the World Values Survey, which is the world's largest survey of human culture and social values. Comes out every few years. And so we are the data partner for doing that through Pavel and the DEC Institute in Slovakia. And then of course, we're sort of newly welcomed, I guess, a month ago into Bird Incubator, which has been great for us so far. So we're really happy to be here and working with them. Anything you guys sort of have as questions, if it comes up later, and we'll be here now and then of course for some drinks afterwards, but feel free to reach out and contact us with anything you guys might have.